This here is Bowser, formerly of Sean and I am recommended to use, watch, and listen to The Zero Hour with RJ Eskow, because RJ Eskow has forgotten more about Social Security and Medicare than I will ever know. And that's not because I'm a moron, because I'm actually not, I don't even talk like that. I actually am a guy who, I'm actually Jonathan Paul Bauman, who went to Columbia University. So I do know my policy, but I don't know anywhere near as much as RJ. So if you want to know anything about Social Security and Medicare, please listen to The Zero Hour and Grease for Peace. Be there or be square. Zero Hour with RJ Eskow.
This is The Zero Hour with RJ Eskow, produced by the WeAct Radio Network in Washington, D.C., and broadcast across the nation. Visit us online at thisisthezerohour.com or at youtube.com/thezerohour. Ladies and gentlemen, RJ Eskow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Zero Hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we are broadcasting the show this week from Detroit, Michigan, where the Netroots Nation Conference, once known as the Blogger Conference, perhaps evolved into something else now, where the Netroots Nation Conference has been taking place. And a couple of observations before we get in on the conference ourselves and on the interviews, most of which we pre-recorded. Before we go to that, which we will in a minute, just a couple of observations about Detroit itself. First of all, I've done several monologues on this program about Detroit, about the water crisis. I've had Sam Riddle on and others to talk about that. So clearly Detroit is in the midst of its own humanitarian crisis when it comes to access to water. That's an aspect of what's going on with Detroit. But I've also talked here about the history of Detroit and the fact that not so long ago in human memory, 4 or 5 decades ago, Detroit was a great place to live, a great place to raise families, an interracial place, a place of opportunity and growth. Now coming to Detroit, and particularly to the Renaissance Center here in downtown Detroit, or the RenCen as it's known, is an experience which, like many in life nowadays, makes me convinced that we are all actually living in a sci-fi channel movie. Because what you have here is a hotel which is so surrealistically constructed. I've been around long enough to remember, for example, the World's Fairs in the 1960s, where you had Futuramas and images of the world of the future that never came to be because the middle class collapsed and America's promise and growth and momentum was interrupted by radical conservatism, among other things, but where there was this vision of the future. For this tiny little enclave inside the city of Detroit, you have that future. You live in a hotel that looks like a space station and also has oddly fourth-dimensional type qualities where you see levels and spaces and catwalks that you somehow are never able to get to. You feel like an animated character in a Jetsons movie or something. But you also have all around you the devastation that is modern Detroit. Detroit, a city with between 40 and 80,000 abandoned buildings. Detroit, which is in the midst of a horrific ongoing depression. Detroit, which has been abandoned by the policy makers of the country. Detroit, which has been declared bankrupt by the powers that be, that has had its democratically elected city government overruled by a emergency manager imposed by the Republican governor, which is part of the Alex strategy. So not only do you have this sort of science fiction-y world of this tiny little bubble in the center of downtown Detroit, but you have the dystopian world, and it just occurs to me as you look around the ruins of Detroit, which there are, and then you spend your time in this tiny little enclave, or enclave isn't even the right word, this tiny little fourth dimensional hypercube that is the Renaissance Center. What you really come to wonder, what I really come to wonder is this the United States they're building for us? Is this what every city is going to look like? I've already said and written that I believe that the looting of Detroit's pension, for example, and the talk of selling its roadways and selling its even zoo animals. I mean, one of the articles I read said, they thought they could get $50,000 for the giraffe in the Detroit Zoo, and they're talking about selling off the Shelby Cobra car in the automotive museum and so on. Is this what they have in store for us? Tiny little futuristic bubbles of wealth inside dystopian ruins. If you read the works of right-wing economists like Tyler Cowen, who's the new darling of people like Tom Friedman, the answer is yes. If you listen to activists who are determined, if you listen to mainstream Democrats, their answer may be, let's manage that transition more humanely. That's not good enough. If you listen to the heart and soul of the activist movement that has always been alive in this country, whose flame still flickers on, the answer is not on our watch, and that should be the answer. More to follow after this break. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. Welcome back. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and you are listening to a special edition of the Zero Hour broadcast from Netroots Nation in Detroit, Michigan. Just talking about wage theft, we're talking more broadly. I mean, this is what you guys want to talk about, right?
Let me tell you, man, the real story today, in my humble view, is not income inequality. The real story is what we're doing about income inequality.
Right.
There are green shoots popping up all over this country, man. And perhaps the stoutest and the greenest is Good Jobs Nation, but William Barber's doing his thing. Ajin Poo with the National Domestic Workers is doing stuff. Rock Restaurant Opportunity Center is doing good things all over this country. I was in Iowa last weekend, and they had a young woman with a group called ICC. Hey, Jamie, what does ICC stand for again? CCI. The last word is improvement. I know that, but I don't know. Is it
in Iowa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're an awesome group.
Yeah.
Dude named Hugh Espy he's killing it. They're working on factory farms. They're working on these big hog pens. But there's also this young woman, and you got to meet this young woman. Her name is Vanessa. She is doing exactly what the Progressive Caucus is doing, but on a city level.
All right. Let's back up a second, because this is, and we're on now. But let's back up a second and say, all right. I've asked this question of a lot of people. I mean, whether it's economists or activists or whatever, Richard Trump, whoever, are the good jobs. Like, I grew up in Utica, New York, right? And Utica, it was mixed neighborhood. It was, ethnic. It was everybody had, like, they were working people. That's what it was. And you know what? On one income, people had houses. They raised kids. They had a nice neighborhood. They bought a car. They retired. They had a pension, and are those days gone?
Well, those days can be restored with some stout organization that is going on now. I mean, the fact is, in 1957, a full third of the American workforce was unionized. Another third was paid as if it was,
right.
And one person could feed a family of four. At the same time, we had segregation, we had women, and the LGBT community was suppressed. So it wasn't like nirvana, but economically speaking, American working people were in a way better spot. And I think that can be restored, but it's going to take some real work. Because, look, we didn't get into a good position by luck or largesse. We got it because people in the 30s fought for the right to organize, got unions, demanded that we have a voice on the job. So now it's time for a revival, and if they can do it then, when it was a crime to be a part of the union, certainly we can do it now, when it's just a heck of a good idea.
Right, absolutely.
And I would also add, the way the American middle class was built in the 50s started in the 30s and 40s with widespread strikes and sit-downs and walkouts in the low-wage jobs at the time. Those were the steel mill jobs and the auto worker jobs. Those were the Walmart jobs of that moment.
And not too far from here, Flint, Michigan.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Historic strike.
That's right. And those workers took dramatic action. And the significant thing, and the reason that we appreciate Keith's leadership, is it's not just workers in motion, but it's political leadership. And those two things work, right? Workers went on strike. President Roosevelt passed the National Labor Relations Act. in response to workers striking. That added 3 million new jobs, new union members to the labor movement. But not only that, right? At the outbreak of World War II, the president said, we're going to make sure every taxpayer dollar, every contract that goes out to the private sector results in a good job. Mm-hmm. And it was those two things, right? It was workers striking and presidential and congressional leadership that created, right, the middle class that you enjoy.
Right.
So here's the thing. So the situation we're in now, it's not the weather. It's not some random act of God. It is the concerted policy initiatives of the far right that are trying to extract decent pay from hard workers. There's a reason we have record profits. Wall Street's over, 17,000 nowadays in trades. There's a reason why they've got all these offshore profits. It's because they're taking it from working people. It's because the line has been moved in a tug of war. It got pulled in the direction of the owners, and it's got to be pulled back the other way in order for us to have a fair economy.
So if I hear you guys correctly, you're saying we've done with theoretic on the broadest level. We've done this before. We know how this works. We can do it again. But now, how does that translate? You've got Good Jobs Nation. You've got Progressive Caucus in Congress. Now, how does that work together? How do you all catalyze each other, for lack of a better word? Maybe that's the right word. Maybe it's not.
That's a good word.
To say
no, that's right. There's a synergy between the two, and I can speak to over the course of the last 2 years. Low-wage workers in the fast food industry, low-wage retail workers at Walmart have gone on strike, tens of thousands, right, in the U.S. and even abroad. And in Washington, D.C., federal contract workers, right, these are fast food workers who work in the Pentagon or work in
Union
the
Station.
Smithsonian or the Union Station, right, have also waged 9 strikes in the past year. And so there is a demand among the people for good jobs and a secure future. And what the CPC has done is really amplify the voice of the voiceless, right, and move the president to act, move members of Congress to act.
But we're not in confusion about who is leading the drive for a fair economy. It is the workers. As members of Congress, these are our constituents. We're doing nothing but heeding the call of the people, which is what you're supposed to do as a member of Congress in a representative democracy. What we're doing is we're saying, what is it that you need to lead a happy life, right? To pursue happiness. And folks are saying, well, I need a good job. I need to be able to afford my bills. I need to be able to, if I'm sick or my kid's sick, I need to be able to leave the job and still come back to it and not go broke doing it. I need health care. I need these are the things that I need. So what we're saying as members of Congress is we're with you. And we in the Progressive Caucus, we see ourselves as the legislative arm of this wave of progressive action. So I didn't come up with wage theft amendments, which we've been tacking on to all these appropriation bills. Joe and Paco and the Good Jobs Nation movement came up with it. And we said, if you're doing it, we're doing it. And so we started introducing these amendments. And it's interesting because since we started introducing these amendments, the first one, there was no attention paid to it. The second one, no attention paid. Then we tacked one on to the defense appropriations bill, which is the biggest, and it passed on a recorded vote, which is a big deal because an unrecorded vote, like a voice vote, it happens. Nobody really knows that it. But we got 20-some Republicans to vote with us on this because apparently we could find 20-some Republicans and all the Democrats to say that wage theft is bad. Well, what happened next? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce started sending letters to Congress saying vote no on the amendment. And we still passed it. We still beat them.
So if I hear you correctly, Keith Ellison, I hear you as saying, there's that apocryphal story about Franklin Roosevelt saying, I agree with you, no, go out and make me do it.
Yeah.
I hear you a little bit saying that, as saying, make us do it.
Well,
in other words,
frankly,
create the political pressure.
When it comes, there's Lynn Winstead, a great Minnesotan over there. So let me tell you this: we're not saying to the Good Jobs Nation, make us do it. With the Progressive Caucus is saying, what is our assignment now?
All right.
The progress. See, so it used to be. See, this is the value. A lot of progressives are like, they don't know what to do with a politician on their side. They don't know what.
Right.
They're so
Right.
used to fighting politicians.
Right.
So now what's new today is that you got people, you're pushing on a door that is not locked. And so when they come to us and say, this is what we need, we say, how can we work together to get it for you? So we just do our side of it and keep running and check back
Right.
in with the Good Jobs Nation. And that's what we do.
And just to concretize that, right? I mean, over the course since May of last year, low-wage workers in Washington went on strike, right? Just to highlight that the federal government, when we think about poverty employers, we generally think about McDonald's or Walmart, but the federal government
Tell them this one.
is the largest creator of low-wage jobs in America, right? Through contracts,
It is.
grants,
It is shocking. I don't think
loans.
people know that. Yeah.
That's right. And so if we want to change the country, we have to change the way the United States government does business.
Absolutely.
Right? We as taxpayers, as workers, as members, we have to say our dollars should go to good jobs.
So let me just get this right, okay? You're saying Franklin Roosevelt said when the government creates jobs, they should be good jobs.
That's right.
Today, the government creates jobs. A lot of them aren't good jobs.
That's right. And that's why workers have been striking at the Pentagon and Union Station and the Reagan Building and the Smithsonian Museums. And what Keith and Raul Grijalva and the members of the CPC have done is amplify that, right? They called on President Obama, lead by example, right? Use your executive powers in the same way that Roosevelt did. Use your executive powers to raise labor standards. And at the State of the Union, because workers struck and because the CPC, right, Keith handed a letter to the president.
Several of them.
Keith held, yeah.
He started getting sick of me.
Right.
Yeah, well,
the CPC, yeah. The CPC
that's
held,
all right, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And the CPC held hearings.
Uh-huh.
Keith was on TV, right? It amplified. And at the State of the Union, the centerpiece was the president said, I am going to lead by example.
That's right.
And so where are we now with that?
So,
go for it.
yeah, no, I was going to say the 1010 executive order has, it was signed. Good Jobs Nation workers were at the White House with Keith.
And that starts when, 2015?
Well, there's a implementation process.
Okay.
So it's in effect, and then depending on when contracts expire with various contractors.
But every federal contractor will have to pay a minimum of 1010
That's
going
right.
forward.
And by the way,
per
this
hour.
is not in any way unusual. There's a lot of other contracts where there are minimum wage requirements.
Right.
And I don't mean minimum wage like
sure.
a little bit of money. I mean like in some highway construction contracts, they got to pay like a decent amount of money. And so this is just looking out for the low wage workers. The thing about what Joe is saying is that, look, Uncle Sam should not be leading the race to the bottom.
Right.
Uncle Sam should be setting good labor standards, and that's what we believe in. And I just want to say there is another leg to this stool that must be mentioned, and that is demos. Now, they provided the intellectual heft, right? They did an important study that showed that Uncle Sam was the low-wage, the largest low-wage funder of low-wage jobs in the country, more than McDonald's or Walmart combined. And so you got the activists, you got the researchers, you got some legislators, you got the press, and we all kind of put this in a stew and kind of put it in a blender and made a smoothie. We worked together.
Now, and I'm sure there were people who said to you, well, the government's going to have to spend more money this way.
So,
but A, thank you, and B, if more people are earning better wages, more people are going to get off government assistance.
Yes.
Right.
Eventually, directly or indirectly,
Thanks
right?
for bringing that up.
And then the government spends less.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right?
Well,
That's exactly
maybe
right.
Joe wants to elaborate on this a little bit, Joe. But I mean, has it ever shocked you that as people are opposing us raising the minimum wage, that the same people who are on minimum wage have to rely on government services?
Right.
Really, because Walmart, McDonald's, and some of these guys won't pay their workers enough, Uncle Sam has to.
Right.
And I think they should pay their workers right and get off the public dole.
Right.
I think, sure. Why are we giving the richest corporation in the world hundreds of millions of dollars in government taxpayer subsidies? Now, if I were a financial conservative, I would be upset about that.
No, that's right. That's right.
I'm just saying.
That's right.
You know.
Just saying.
And
Just saying.
you know,
Yeah.
I mean, and the other part of this is we allow these companies like McDonald's to operate on military bases, to operate
Right.
at Union Station, to operate at the Pentagon, right? These are lucrative contracts,
Captive audiences.
right?
Yeah.
Lucrative contracts that we say, all right, it's okay. We'll pay you, you know, we'll have workers paid minimum wage that then have to turn to food stamps, Section 8, right, to support their basic needs. We should, as taxpayers, demand, let's cut that off at the root and say, good jobs should be the starting principle. Nobody, right, should be on public assistance if you're working in a federally subsidized job.
And here's another part of this, if I may.
Absolutely.
So there's a recent study that just came out indicating that when you have exorbitant CEO pay and executive pay, like really high CEO pay,
Like we have now. 286 times the average worker's wage or whatever.
Well, what it does is it misaligns risk allocation, right? So if you're making all this money, now you think whatever you do is like magic, and so you don't make careful decisions for the company. And they have shown that some of the highest CEO paid companies with the highest CEO pay do not have the highest share price. Why?
That's interesting. Yeah.
So it's better if you have some nexus between the worker and the people who manage the company.
Right.
You know, for everybody.
And that's a good segue into, you know, where we're going next. I mean,
which was going to be my where I was going next in this conversation.
Right on.
Was going to be to ask you where you're going
well,
next.
you know, the truth is, at the State of the Union, right, when the president announced that he was going to issue the 1010 executive order for federal
Right.
contract workers, he started off by saying, holding up Costco
Right.
as an example of a
Right.
good American company, right? Here is a company that pays its workers well. They have high profitability, low worker turnover. He said, we should be like Costco.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I'm going to lead by example and do 1010. Well, the truth is, the 1010 executive order is a solid first step. First time
Right.
since Roosevelt that a president has used executive authority to raise labor standards. But the truth is, right, we should demand what the president himself said. We should be like Costco. We as taxpayers say, let's reward companies
Right.
that pay Costco living wages, right? Costco pays on average $21 an hour. 88% of its workers have health care.
Mm-hmm.
We should give a preference for companies to pay living wages and benefits.
Well, yeah.
We should give a preference to companies like Costco that allow workers to unionize. Costco doesn't interfere with workers trying to come together and have a voice at the table.
And parenthetically, I would add that we as consumers also might want to think about doing that same sort of thing.
Yes,
That I favor going to Costco
That's right.
versus
So, yeah.
Walmart
that's right.
because I respect what Costco is doing for my economy, my society, my country.
That's right. And
right.
this is
Right.
I would say this is the ultimate consumer campaign. If we can get the U.S. government to say we are going to invest our taxpayer dollars in companies that are more like Costco, less like Walmart.
Right.
And if we do that, the $1.3 trillion that we spend every year in contracts, loans, and grants,
Yep.
we can transform the American economy and address income inequality.
Well, the U.S. government is the biggest buyer in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nobody buys more than the U.S. government. If the U.S. government sets good labor standards and demands them,
Right.
then everybody's going to have to fall in line.
And you know what? It's not like contractors are going to stop putting in bids to the U.S.
Oh,
government.
you better believe they'll
So-
be. They're
No, these
lucrative.
are, yeah.
They're very lucrative. I
no,
used
that's
to be
right.
in that line of work, if I
Yeah.
may confess
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
on a small scale.
Right.
But it's still,
Right.
they're
Well,
not
and-
going to walk away. They're
and-
not going to say, oh, I don't want
right.
to do that.
And there's also, you know, in addition to, you know, contractors not walking away, there's a ripple effect. When the president announced the 1010,
Yep.
companies like the Gap, IKEA recently, right, said, we're going to raise the minimum wage. We're going to follow the president's example, right? Then you had the mayor of New York issue an executive order.
Right.
You had the chief of the Cherokee Nation issue an executive order. There was a ripple effect, right? When the
Seattle
president
goes
leads,
15, yeah.
right,
Seattle goes 15.
and
yeah.
it helped create a movement. And so what
I
workers,
think 15 is a good number, by the way.
Yeah,
I like
I
that
agree.
number.
yeah,
I like
15 a
1010.
unit.
I like 15
Yeah.
better.
15's better.
15's even better. And, you know, what the CPC and low-wage workers are talking about is, you know, how do we actually raise the bar and say, establish that principle, right? Like, we don't need the minimum. We need much more than the minimum
Right.
if we're going to rebuild the American economy
No
and
doubt.
spread abundance.
Well, we probably should add here for anybody listening to us that today's minimum wage worker is not the minimum wage worker of 30 years ago. The average age is I've seen between 29 and 33 years old. The average minimum wage worker is putting food on the table for a family.
Right.
The average minimum wage, most minimum wage workers are female.
Right.
We're talking about people who need to be paid better.
Right.
And I just want to say, one of the things that we have to confront here is that when you ask some folks why is the pay so low for American workers, they say, well, globalization and training. That's not true.
That's not true that's not true in the retail business.
Well, that's not true, period.
Yeah.
First of all, some of the most highly educated people I know are striking and going because they're not getting paid right, and that is the adjunct professors.
Oh
out there.
boy. Oh man.
Now you're going to tell me they're not trained,
Right.
they're not educated,
Yeah.
and they're getting the shaft. And then in terms of the globalization, I had a great time with a guy named Michael Summers, who's a retired labor leader in Germany. It's about how you structure your economy.
That's right.
In Germany they have workers on the board of the company.
Right.
In Germany, everybody has to take fewer hours during a slowdown as opposed to just start laying off folks.
Right.
They have more social supports. They have a healthcare system that works for people. They have paid leave. They have paternity and maternity leave. It's just a different way of living, and so it doesn't have to be this way.
Right.
Don't let
No.
anybody tell you it has
That's
to be this way.
We believe that. And where can people go to find out more about this whole effort?
Well, we'd like people to check into the Progressive Caucus and Progressive Congress. Just go online. You can use a search engine to find us, Progressive Caucus or the Progressive Congress. And of course, we're
Good Jobs Nation.
Yeah,
And then goodjobsnation.org, and we're on Facebook as well.
May I add that this Thursday, on the 24th, that's Thursday, we're going to have a hearing on wage theft. Because
Excellent.
I don't believe my colleagues know how serious the magnitude of this problem is. That they've estimated that up to the Economic Policy Institute has estimated that like $2,600 or more dollars per year are coming out of low-wage workers' checks in theft.
Right.
So this is a whole lot of money. We can't tolerate it.
It's even when I've interviewed shift supervisors, it's even automated.
Right.
They look at it. You got too many hours on your.
Right.
You got to start deducting,
Yeah.
claiming somebody took a lunch hour when they didn't, or whatever.
Right.
So that's great, and
Okay.
We'll keep following. Representative Keith Ellison.
All right. Thank
Joseph
you, brother.
Gibargi is from the Good
Good
Job
Job
Nation.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Awesome.
We
Awesome.
appreciate it. And welcome back to the Zero Hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and with us now is blogger extraordinaire, broadcaster extraordinaire, columnist extraordinaire, pundit extraordinaire, Shannon Moore, visiting us here at Netroots Nation in Detroit from the great state of Alaska with a story to tell that I haven't even heard yet. So, Shannon, thank you for joining us.
I'll try to be extraordinary.
You don't have to be,
all that.
but just
All right.
be you, and that will be extraordinary.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, I'm told you had just yesterday a victory.
Yes,
On something you've been working on for a while.
something that rarely happens to progressives, it seems.
No, don't be that
No,
way.
I mean, we fight a lot of battles
Right.
that take a long time.
Right.
I mean, the civil rights battle wasn't, women's suffrage didn't just, nobody handed that to anybody. And certainly the majority of our struggles aren't, you got to actually wrestle them away from people. So it was about 9-10 years struggle that I've been on the No Pebble Mine. So
Okay,
you may have seen this.
I saw that, and for those of you watching, she is holding up the Pebble Mine note with a little line through it.
Yes.
So tell us what the Pebble Mine is, or was, or isn't, as the case
Well,
may be.
the Pebble Mine was a proposal for the largest open pit mine ever proposed in North America. And most people realize that an open pit mine is just this like giant, big, ugly hole. But this mine was proposed at the worst possible place you could put it. Like if I put it at your house, it would be a better place for it than where they proposed.
Not for me, because I
Not
live
for you
1,000
personally.
miles away from Alaska.
At least.
Right.
But this proposal was to be at the headwaters of Bristol Bay, which
That's
is
pretty bad.
Bristol Bay this year. Already, let's see, it's the middle of July. Already we've had 30 million fish returned to it.
Right. So I was thinking as you said that I could move away from my house, but I'd still have to eat fish.
Right.
So
Exactly.
and
And it probably wouldn't damage the fish at your place, or
Right.
But in this case, they wanted to put this in the last really large wild salmon run. Now, people are familiar with fish farms,
Right.
where they have to like actually feed dye to the fish. They never migrate. They never do their thing. In this case, not only are they wild fish, they're not even hatcheried, which means they're not even like raising fry and dumping them in and letting them have a normal existence. This is all completely wild. And this ecosystem is really tremendous. It's really fragile. It's wolves, it's bears, it's fish, and it's people that have lived there for 10,000 years.
Right.
It's actual salmon culture based towns and societies. There's over 17,000 jobs in that industry. It's just a remarkable thing was threatened by foreign-owned mining companies.
So now when you say the large, I mean, some of these open pit mines are gigantic already. Some of the ones that we have, I mean, like you can see them from space, gigantic, right? I mean, they're really big. So when you say the largest, so this was a plan for the, I guess, consortium of foreign mine owners to come in and basically put a giant gaping hole in the middle of all of this. And if you've ever seen an open pit mine, which I have, with mountains of basically waste material as they've gone through and mined surrounding it. If you've seen them, and I'm sure you have, they're really devastating and really ugly. It's like a huge bomb exploded.
It is. Well, in Alaska, if you took Alaska and cut it in half, Texas would be the third largest state. It's a huge state. All of the mines combined that are happening right now in Alaska would fit in like one little tiny corner in the bottom of how big this mine proposal was.
Wow.
We've never seen anything proposed as large as it.
So how wide across, for example?
Well, the tailings
at the end.
The tailings pond would be like 28 miles. Wow. But what they would use to back that up, which would have cyanide in it, which, if I gave you a glass of water and said it has just a little bit of cyanide in it, you should be fine, you probably wouldn't just be like, okay.
Right. I wouldn't have a second glass.
But you probably wouldn't. But for other reasons.
Right.
But what they wanted to have that would back up this tailings pond was this earthen dam, earth smushed up, that would be 4 miles long and 700 feet high. Well, the problem with it being an earthen dam is that that's one of the most seismic areas in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Alaska had in 1964, we had an earthquake that was 9.2 on the Richter scale, bigger than what happened to Japan and their tsunami. The tsunami that was created from our earthquake actually killed people in California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, British Columbia. I mean, it was just massive. So
an earthen dam holding all this water would be made out of the same...
Forever.
Would be made out of the same material that moves when there's an earthquake. That is to say, earth.
Well, exactly. And once you get to a certain point in an earthquake, the actual ground forgets its properties as a solid and turns to a liquid, which is where it will wave, so that because it's jarred loose enough that it doesn't hold itself to itself, and it liquefies.
Right.
So that's not going to work. So we've been fighting that, and the indigenous people there have been fighting this so hard. The environmentals, Trout Unlimited has been one of the forefronts in this, just because of the most amazing trout fishing in the world is there. So, we have been fighting the state for years and years and years. And the state basically changed enough policies that the people that regulate the mining permit process, they now have paid by the mining companies.
How does that work? So this is a little bit like some of the Wall Street regulatory agencies where the mining companies pay a fee to pay for the budget of their own regulators?
Exactly.
Is that how it works? And then what always comes out of that, what's the problem? What always comes out of that was, well, then we get to have a say in and who gets the jobs there,
Exactly.
right? And then when they retire from those jobs, they probably get hired by the mining companies for big salaries. So they don't want to push the. I'm just improvising.
You're
here.
just putting two and two together.
Right. Okay.
So it's like the state became remarkably worthless. So we had ballot initiatives that were on a local level of just the people that live in that borough.
Mhm.
They didn't want the mine. What happened was the state sued the local government and said, you don't get to decide this. They're like, what? What happened to local control and
Right.
big government and state government overreach and federal overreach? You know, it's like all this
Right.
stuff. So they took the local borough to court, and alongside the mining company. It's like our own attorney general office is working and Department of Justice is working for the mining company now. It's just like, okay, so they bought and sold that. You know, they bought and sold that out on a state level. So Trout Unlimited and the Bristol Bay Native organizations, the tribes, the corporations, they went to Washington and they said to the EPA, we need your help. This was after we got Tiffany and Company and 49 other jewelry companies to say, we sign a pledge, ran in the New York Times, we sign a pledge, we will not use gold out of that mine.
Oh, wow.
We had Nora's, we had in Washington, D.C., restaurants all on both coasts saying, no pebble, you know, we want sustainable fish. Paul Greenberg wrote a book about it. I mean, National Geographic, Dateline came out. I mean, this became, you know, Robert Redford weighed in. Ted Nugent and the Indigo Girls both didn't want the mine. So that should tell you when you get that kind of
It also
support, you
it
know, you
also
create the
portends
loop.
some frightening musical collaborations in the future.
It does.
But
Absolutely. But we all, I mean, it was this huge groundswell. And, you know, we were fighting the state. Well, the EPA opened up a study and they basically were like, we need to look at the science and we need to see if this is sustainable. And so they looked at the science and they basically said, if what their ruling came out as was, if every single thing goes exactly perfectly for this mine, you're still going to damage the fish.
of course.
And so what we asked them to do was to please use the 404C of the Clean Water Act to say this land is not suitable for this purpose because this land is too valuable for the greater good. Right now, over 50% of the world's sockeye salmon come out of one bay in Alaska, this bay that needed to be protected. So on Friday, the EPA said, all right, this is what we're going to do. This is not going to be all right. This is on the front page of The Guardian. This is on Washington Post. This is all over. And
that's a win.
It's
That's
a
clear win.
It's a win for us. And
So that calls for a 0-hour high five.
it's super
All right.
exciting to have that. But at one point, several years ago, I had a couple glasses of wine with a couple of attorneys from the Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C.
You got to watch the drinking with attorneys.
Okay, but this is a curious.
Just a word to the
this is-
wise from a friend.
This
Okay?
is or going hunting with them, as I've heard
Oh,
from Dick Cheney. So we're talking, and I'm telling them this, like, this is a way of life for these people. This is part of our culture. This is an incredible thing, this ecosystem. And finally, this guy broke, and he says, we don't give a rat's ass about your mine or your fish or your Eskimos or anything else. We don't care.
right. That sounds
And I said,
plausible.
oh, what? And he said, you may be right about the mine being bad. You probably are. I don't care. And I'm like, what are you saying? And he said, we don't want the precedent of the EPA being able to stop a project before it starts. We don't want, because this has been proposed, they've been digging
Right.
and they've had all sorts of fines for, you know, misuse of water and poison and all this stuff. But he said, we don't want the EPA to be able to stop something. Development. We're not anti-development, we're the Chamber of Commerce. And so this whole fight right now, what I've been fighting for is a way of life for Alaskans and for the environment there and for the people there. I mean, I want to save these fish so I can catch them and eat them.
Right.
You know, it's
right.
not
Well,
like so I can hug them, but at the same time, it's like what the other side's been fighting, in large part, has been what is the power of the EPA to be able to stop something. And so we really need people across the country to realize that's actually what you're fighting. If your cause is mountaintop removal in West Virginia or Appalachia, if it's the XL pipeline, if whatever your particular issue is in your part of the country, realize that the fight for Pebble Mine has been about the EPA having power or not.
Right, and and stopping the Chamber of Commerce. If J.P. Morgan and Satan made it, and
I'm
were
sorry,
able
you're
to,
being redundant.
and were able to spawn like reptiles, all of their offspring would be the Chamber of Commerce. So you want to stop the Chamber of Commerce, you want the EPA to have this power, and you want to save the Bay in this particular.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like ideal. I cover a lot of environmental issues, but this is like an H bomb. I mean, this is what it feels like to me. It feels like a thermonuclear war. It's on a massive scale compared to other ecological violations that are also horrible.
Well, and there have been very few fights that I've been in, which I've been in a lot. I care about a lot of different things. Very few have been so white hat, black hat, right, wrong, no brainers as this one. And I think that's why, the consensus of Alaskans are on board with this. But that people that I've talked to here at Netroots for the last 6 years, I've been throwing no pebble parties for 6 years. Like, we can't have this mine. And I'd explain it to people, be like, here's some salmon, and let's talk about this. And people would just
like
be like,
the Bambi apocalypse. I mean,
right.
Nobody can be like for this.
This is like poisoning Nemo.
Exactly. So that's the sequel to Finding Nemo.
Exactly.
Offing Nemo.
Yeah.
But
with a mine.
with 28 miles of sludge that is going to explode. And
it's like being a little bit pregnant is, this mine. A little bit of a mine is like being a little bit pregnant. It's just going to get bigger, and you're going to have to take care of it forever.
With the spawn of Satan and J.P. Morgan.
And there's no shelf life to cyanide, which is what this produces. There's no shelf life. And so when people were like talking to me about Sarah Palin, I'd be like, okay, Sarah Palin has a shelf life. Cyanide does not. Can we talk about Pebble Mine?
Sarah Palin has a half-life, which equates to a governor's term in the state of Alaska.
Yes, it does.
She actually does have a half-life. But
the quitter-in-chief.
The quitter, God bless her. Best move she ever made. But, okay, so I guess I would close by asking you this, Shannon, more. So we have a victory at the EPA. How permanent is this victory? In other words, if Ted Cruz becomes president and appoints radical extremists and all that, can this be overturned? And someone else says, well, okay, we give the go light now?
Well, I think the science, basically what they said was you can't have a mine. What they said is you can't prove that you can do this safely, so you can't do it until you can. And
could somebody else overthrow that?
If they could come back and say...
I hate to be a bummer, but
but if someone could come back and say, we've scientifically found a way to do this at some point in the future, there's...
Or could the EPA rescind its ruling when someone else takes over who's a radical right-winger?
That hasn't been done before.
Oh, okay. Well, that was kind of what I was getting at.
God only knows how groundbreaking, corporatists and fascists can be. But, that's part of why this is so essential for Obama to do in this point of his presidency. And we have, Sandra Day O'Connor talked to him about it. We've had, Rich Trumka, the AFL-CIO, talk to Obama about it. There's a lot of people, and I think it helped us that one of Joe Biden's favorite places in the world is Bristol Bay.
I'm sure it helps. And by the way, this is the point where we were talking about this earlier here at Netroots, but this is the point where, like, I spend 99% of the show hammering Obama and everybody in the administration, where I say, boy, I'm really glad they did this. A corporate sellout. You sold out to the centrist them. But no, this is a great thing. I'm thrilled about it. I'm thrilled. I know you played a big part in this. I'm thrilled with that. And so congratulate you, and thank you for coming on the show and talking to us about this.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thanks.
You bet. I'm Richard RJ Eskow. Welcome back to the Zero Hour. With us now is one of our favorite guests, fellow broadcaster, host of the Majority Report and co-host of Ring of Fire Radio, my good friend Sam Cedar. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, RJ.
Always a pleasure. Now, listen, we're here. We spent a couple days or more at Netroots Nation. We've been coming a long time to this thing.
I've been here every year. In fact, the Majority Report back in its Air America Inc. It was the first radio show to broadcast from this. We were in Vegas, up in a skybox,
Oh, very good.
overseeing a conference. It was fun.
Now, is this the 10th year or the 9th year? I can't remember. Are we
2005, I
the
believe,
ninth
was
year.
the 9th year.
So we're coming up on 10, and so what are your impressions? You've been coming even longer than me, but I've been coming a while. What are your impressions of how it's changed or evolved, or what the feel of the place is?
Everybody seems pretty clear that it has changed, and we're speaking in broad generalizations
Sure.
here. I mean, I think to a certain extent, you're an ant on an elephant at these things, but and not surprising, there's not. I mean, the first one was really about people coming to see who was behind that weird commenter ID, and who. And what the bloggers look like. And I think, frankly, nobody knew. And the big surprise was that they looked fairly just like your average person. And at that time, I think a little older than people thought.
Exactly, yeah.
And since that time, as blogs have become less of an element online, I think what you have now is less bloggers, far less bloggers, to the extent that there are any, and a lot more institutional activism, and I'll also say a lot more union presence. In the first year or two, there was a real cleave, I think, between the online community and the labor community. In fact, I think it was the second year, it was a very big deal when the unions had an event at Netroots, and now unions are all over this thing, and so it's a lot more like a trade conference for institutions than it is basically a big party and a get together for individuals who are sort of disconnected in the flesh but connected online.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I take your point about not wanting to generalize and say that it's one thing or another, because but there was more a sense, in my opinion, that there was a kind of a one thing early on, which is this online community coming to meet each other. Oh, because I just remember they're always, oh, you're so and so, and you're this one, and there was that kind of fun sense of discovery, and there were more women than, there was a stereotype that it was 19-year-old guys, basically, but there were women and there were older people. I thought I'd be the oldest one, but I wasn't. And, just a lot of diversity. And the sense that we were coming together, as you said, after having been online. Now I feel like the online part of it is pretty incidental. There's more institutional presence, of which labor is a big piece. And I think there was a sense of almost, I don't want to say insurgent movement, because that's romanticizing, but a kind of sense of we're.
I think that's actually accurate. I think it was an insurgent movement. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was anti-establishment, but it was definitely, at that time, we were the outsiders.
Right.
I mean, anybody who came to that conference came so because they felt isolated because they were outsiders. In fact, that's what blogging was really about at the beginning. This is the only vehicle that we have to express an opinion that is outside of the mainstream opinion as defined by television, radio, and even the large institutional players. And so this is not an insurgent. To the extent that there's an insurgent movement out there, this is not representative of it. And, and I was just talking to David Dan, who I know you spoke to earlier, just saying that, I feel like my experience here is marginal. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm meeting certain people that I've, known for years, and that's what I think it. And at the beginning, that experience of just like wanting to hook up with people we didn't really know was, I think, much more shared. Now I think it's like coming together and creating strategic alliances. And one would never have said that the first year.
Oh, absolutely. And, another thought I had, I'm curious to know if you agree or not, is I was thinking as we were talking about this that you know, when political candidates started coming. Remember 2007 when the presidential wannabes on the Democratic side started coming to Netroots, started reaching out to Netroots. Mark Warner threw a party, and that
But
was
he
a big
did
deal.
that very early on.
Right,
Warner.
that was
the first year, I think.
Oh, maybe. But when that started to become, you had presidential candidates actually speaking here and that kind of thing. Here's the point I was getting to, was that when that first started happening, when the unions started coming, I think a lot of people had the feeling, wow, look at this, they're coming to us, right? And so we have some presence here. Now I feel coming here this year, and I don't mean to down, I'm having a good time and everything, but now I feel as if whether it's the Ready for Hillary party or Joe Biden speaking or some of the institutional presidents, I feel more like those of us who are part of that original community are coming to them. That somehow there's been a center of gravity shift away from, isn't this great that they're coming to us, to now, well, no, this is like
well, I don't think it's an insurgent. I don't think this represents an insurgency anymore. I mean, I think, you know, and it's a combination of who attends and who doesn't attend.
Right.
Frankly, I mean,
well,
you and I,
yeah.
well, I could, you know, I could list off a bunch of people who, you know, were, you know, sort of like a big presence in the first. But you know, right now, if you go back and at least from my experience, when you compare what that first year was about, there's no Digby is not here this year. I mean, and part of this is coincidence. I'm not saying that people are making a statement or not. I don't know. Duncan Black is not here. Atrios. John Amato not here this year from Crooks and Liars. None of the people from Open Left back at the days, like the Matt Stolers and the Dave Sirotas. And even at that time, Glenn Greenwald, Unclaimed Territory. At that time, Jane Hampshire. And you know, some of these people have stopped coming a while back. Some people are just not here because it wasn't convenient. But it is much of that energy is just not taking place here. It's a more expensive thing to attend in some ways. It's a different thing. For me, it still serves a similar purpose, which is that I go and see people that I wanted to see, and it gives me, as a broadcaster, an opportunity to have interviews in person with people I wouldn't, you know, they're just here. I mean, I go to the Families USA conference, and I have very little in common with a lot of those people, but it gives me an opportunity to talk to a couple of law professors and healthcare experts, and to a certain extent, this has mutated into that. I don't feel like I am part of a movement here, like I think I felt early on, but it still serves its purpose and it's interesting to me. But
and I think that's a great way to put it. Not feeling like part of a movement or a community, maybe is another word that might, at least for me, fit in there. And obviously, as you say, you can't generalize, but there's a certain kind of zeitgeist to an experience, and that I think.
But all those things tend to have a half-life too. In my experience, is that anything good like that has energy at the beginning, it's only going to last a couple of years, and then it's going to either go away or turn into something that's a little bit more institutional and a little bit more less dynamic in some respects.
Yeah, and to be not to be completely negative, I mean, I think there are wonderful individuals and groups here that I'm delighted to see, and I think people are doing great things, and I love that people showed up for Detroit's water problem. I love that people are showing up for some other issues here. I like to see a renewed and reinvigorated labor movement, so I'm pleased about that. I just don't think it coheres into what it used to. And I don't want to be the old guy saying, well, back in 2005, we had, you know.
You can make that assessment without it necessarily being a judgment. I mean, you know, and maybe other things will grow in the future. And this becomes a stalwart conference that people come to, and then there are other insurgents. I mean, you know, there was, having come out of the entertainment business, I remember where Sundance was very radical, and then all of a sudden it was Slam Dance. And then there was like the alternate to Slam Dance. And so that's the nature of things, and I think there's definitely value in this. It's not what it was, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
All right, well, we'll end it there, and thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. Sam Cedar, host of The Majority
That's right.
Report and co-host of Ring of Fire Radio. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we are back on the Zero Hour. As I mentioned, we are broadcasting from Netroots Nation in Detroit, and Netroots Nation was the blogger conference. You could call it more a liberal or progressive conference now, in a broader sense. Maybe more on that later in the show. It certainly will be talking to Sam Cedar, the great broadcaster, about that. But a couple observations. One is that, first of all, we're staying in a hotel here with a science fiction convention, and so certainly the blogger contingent that remains at this conference, which is smaller as a percentage of the group than it used to be, but the bloggers who come to this conference can be content knowing that they're being co-housed with perhaps the only group in the nation that's nerdier than we are. So there's that, number one. But it's interesting when I keep alluding to the changing nature of this conference that I'm attending. I got on the elevator yesterday, and there were all sorts of people from the science fiction convention on the elevator. It's not hard to tell who they are because they're the ones who are dressed like characters in obscure steampunk games, or even people are still dressing like Star Wars characters, which just blows me away. But because it's been a long time since that movie came out. But so we got in, and they were asking about my conference because we were identifiable by our badges or whatever. And one of them made an interesting observation. He said, the people at your conference are either wearing T-shirts and look like nerds, or they're wearing suits and business clothing. And he said, and I was trying to figure out what exactly you do and why there would be a split like that. And I said, well, the people who look like nerds wearing T-shirts or whatever, they're the core of what this group originally was, which were bloggers and people who live with their fingers hovering over a keyboard. The people in suits are the people who are approaching them in the hopes of influencing them on behalf of a political candidate or a particular organization. And that's kind of the split now. And I would say that I got nothing against suits. I wear them myself from time to time. But I would say that the split, the suit to T-shirt split, is evolving, and we'll talk about that more as we go along. The other thing that's, of course, notable here is that although there are 2 years to go until the 2016 election, there's still a lot of talk about that, probably more so at this conference than discussion of the 2014 election, which is coming right up, and that's probably a tactical mistake. But having said, we had Joe Biden here, who many people think will run for president in 2016. He spoke. We had Hillary Clinton did not attend, but her fundraising organization, Ready for Hillary, did attend. They gave out a lot of coffee cups and a lot of other swag, I guess. I saw the coffee cups everywhere. And Elizabeth Warren spoke here. Of course, she said she's not running, but there is a group called Ready for Warren, which is an answer to Ready for Hillary. And their giveaways were very popular. But I've met very few people here who wouldn't vote for Hillary. So I don't know how I feel about that, but that seems to be the prevailing sentiment. So if I were one of Hillary's strategists, I would say we don't have to worry about the left right now. And as a member of the left, that's not what I want powerful political figures to be thinking. I want powerful political figures to be thinking, I got to get these people to turn out for me in 2016. I got to pivot to the left. I don't see that as a takeaway from this conference. Now, I did see a lot of people having fun, getting all excited about Elizabeth Warren, getting pumped up by her speech, getting pumped up by her rigged game rhetoric, which I love, which I think is right on the money, and then taking their Hillary cups and wrapping an Elizabeth Warren sticker around it so that they could drink their coffee and show their enthusiasm for Elizabeth Warren. But at the end of the day, if the party leaders believe that they'll vote for Hillary anyway, that's always been the rap on the left, that where they're going to go, they'll vote for whoever we put in front of them. If that's the belief, I'm not sure the left is going to be a viable force at the national level in 2016. I hope that's not true. Having said that, I hope the left can be a viable force in congressional, local, Senate, gubernatorial, state house races around the country, and I would encourage them to do that because there's a lot of exciting work being done in that area, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the show when we interview a Washington, D.C. candidate. So stick with us. We got more to come. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. This is the Zero Hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we are here with Stephanie Taylor, co-founder of PCCC, the Progressive Congressional Change Committee. Did I get that right?
Progressive Change Campaign Committee, but
I never get it
you're
right.
close.
I never get it right. Okay, the Progressive Change Campaign Committee.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, I'll get it right from now on. So they're the folks that are the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, the progressive wing of electoral politics, and we're big fans of them here on the Zero Hour. Stephanie's the co-founder. So what have you guys been up to lately?
Well, we just announced $1 million raised for progressive candidates around the country so far this cycle, which is really exciting. Folks chip in from around the country with $3 and $5 donations, and this is really a big number and represents, I think, a lot of excitement by progressives around this election.
Now, what do you do with that money when you get it? How do you pick candidates? How many candidates are you going to be backing?
We're going to be backing, probably deeply endorsing about 24 candidates this cycle. But we're going to be providing support to candidates across the country with some of our infrastructure. We've trained about 500 candidates and finance directors and field directors so far this cycle all over the country.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I didn't, I think that's important because I think that when people think of contributing to PCCC or any other group, they think, well, they take my money and they spread it out to good candidates. But in a way, I view things like training campaign directors or campaign staff as a kind of dollar multiplier.
That's right. Absolutely. We believe that if campaigns have great staff who know what they're doing and make better decisions, then they can actually save money and run more efficient and more winning campaigns.
So does training include like training and messaging to say that, these are the kinds of economic messages that people resonate with. These are the kinds of policy positions that people, because obviously
Absolutely.
There's also the nuts and bolts, the mechanics of campaign management. But does it include that, the kind of messaging that says, no, don't go to the middle. Don't pretend to be Republican light, that we hear the polls, hear the studies, hear the messages that work?
Absolutely. We run polls all over the country. And what we've seen from our polls, as I know you know, is that progressive positions are winning positions. A vast majority of the country supports stuff like expanding Social Security, seeing Wall Street bankers who broke the law go to jail. And what we do is at our trainings, we actually share our polling with these progressive candidates and let them know that even in red states, even in places like Kentucky and West Virginia, Texas, that these are winning issues and that they should be campaigning proudly on these winning issues.
And I'm glad that you mentioned putting Wall Street bankers in jail. I was thinking as you were talking of phrases like orange is the new pinstripe, maybe. I think I'm going to go with that.
I like it.
Now, you also mentioned when we were talking earlier that that you're the Elizabeth Warren wing. And what is that? There are Warren for President people here. What does that mean, Elizabeth Warren wing? I mean, everybody loves Warren's, people of a certain kind, meaning most people love Elizabeth Warren's message, but that's a camera. But so people love her message, but what does it mean when you say, are you working with Warren, or are you just basically echoing and resonating and amplifying the message that she has with candidates like her?
So why do we love Elizabeth Warren? We love Elizabeth Warren because she's putting forward a proactive, populist vision for America. She is saying, don't just defend Social Security and not cut Social Security. Let's expand Social Security. Let's not just, let student debt be kept at the status quo. Let's actually try and lower interest rates. She is putting forward this proactive agenda.
And by the way, for those who aren't watching on YouTube, Stephanie is actually making Elizabeth Warren gestures like this as she says, yes, she's actually big. So, well, she is. So in other words, you use the word proactive, or it's not. I don't want to use the fighting metaphor, but she's in a sense she's going on the offensive.
Absolutely.
Instead of saying no, it's wrong to do what the right is doing, she's actually saying this is what we should do.
Absolutely.
This is what needs to be done.
Yes.
And so you're looking for other people who carry that message. The other thing about
right.
the other thing about Elizabeth Warren is that she does these things in a very human way that people can relate to. You know, she's kitchen table. She's not, she's not conference table. So are you also looking for candidates who have? That's a gift.
It is.
Are you able to screen for that? How would you screen for that with candidates?
Well, I think that's important. I mean, it's about warmth and it's about empathy and it's about also recognizing the issues that working people are actually facing in their daily lives, and she gets that. And so what we're looking for are candidates who have that, but who also, and I think just as importantly, are organizers. She's an organizer in the Senate. She is proactively moving forward her agenda. And we're looking for folks who aren't just going to hold power for the sake of holding power, but who are going to use their office and use their power to push forward progressive legislation. And so what we found with our endorsed candidates, is this group of people who are committed to doing that, who have embraced this populist agenda and this populist platform. And what we're finding is that grassroots donors and grassroots volunteers reward them for that. They're able to have, we call it the Elizabeth Warren effect. When they embrace some of these policies, then as a result, they raise a lot of money. They get a lot of excited volunteers. I think it's one of the reasons we've been able to raise $1 million so far for progressive candidates, because people are excited to see these candidates really, taking on these issues.
So what's the emotional state? What's your emotional state? CCC's emotional state, the people you work with, is it grim fighting? Is it sunny and optimistic? Is it where's your head at? It's a funny question, I know, but I think it's important in a way.
It feels great because it feels like finally progressives have built the infrastructure we need to start being competitive. It feels like we're finally out there putting forward this on offense vision for America. It's a great place to be. I was saying to someone, just in terms of Netroots Nation, over the last few years, every time I come here, reporters ask a lot of questions about Obama. And this year, for the first time, instead they're asking about Elizabeth Warren. And that is a very exciting place for progressives to be.
No, it's a great place to be. Okay, before we end, tell me one thing that you promise not to tell any other interviewer here. No, I'm just kidding. No,
I have to think about that.
Where can people go? I'm just teasing. Where can people go to find out more about PCCC and chip in if they're so inclined?
Oh, please do. They should come to boldprogressives.org. That's our website. You can see all our endorsed candidates. They can chip in to support any of our progressive endorsed candidates, and sign up to volunteer and join the fight.
Thank you so much, Stephanie Taylor, co-founder and co-head of PCCC, which is Progressive Change Campaign Committee, right? Did I get it right?
You got it right. You got it right.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we are back on the 0 Hour, broadcasting from Netroots Nation. And with us now is Stephanie Kelton. Stephanie is the chair of the Department of Economics at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, and she is also one of the leading experts in this country on modern monetary theory, among other things. She also is one of the principal authors, maybe the editor, I don't know, of the new Economic Perspectives blog, which I read regularly, and you're interested in the kind of stuff I write about, you probably should too. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So listen, I've seen you. We're here on Radio Row at Netroots Nation, and I've seen you making the rounds of interviews. I'm interested to know what in general is on your mind to talk about. But we talk a lot on this show about inequality and about what to do about inequality and about some of the prevailing economic trends. We've had Rob Johnson on, who runs the Institute for New Economic Thinking, and I know you've done some work with Rob and INET talking about the sort of misguided ideas sometimes that seep into our economic conversation. But I am interested. I've never had anybody on this show talking about modern monetary theory. And, I have a little grounding in economics. I've written on it. I've run projects in it, but mostly healthcare. But I don't have a deep theoretical background. So, what comes to my mind when MMT, as it's abbreviated, I mean, two things come to mind. One is the Cross of Gold speech by William Jennings Bryan, and bimetallism, the idea that we wouldn't tether ourselves.
Right.
And this seems to me a sort of non-metalism, a sort of, and the other is Adam Smith's quote about money being a construct, a collectively agreed upon artificial construct. And I think, but you'll tell me how I'm wrong, where, when, and how I'm wrong. My understanding is that modern monetary theory basically says that governments create currency by fiat, or money by fiat. It's not tied to a physical object like gold anymore, and therefore we should recognize that. Is that the general idea, and make policy accordingly?
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I mean, so many of the textbooks that were written, Samuelson's textbook, right? All the way after the publication of the general theory. And you get this branch of economics that becomes macroeconomics, right, as distinct from just political economy or economics more generally. And these textbooks just sort of get repackaged year after year. We change the covers. We don't change the content a whole lot, right? A little bit. But for the most part, the economics that we teach today looks very much like the economics that we taught in the 60s when the monetary system was completely different. And so what we try to do is emphasize that we had this fundamental change in the way the monetary system is set up, and that is, Richard Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard. And so in 1971, the system went under a complete overhaul, and the textbooks never made the same transition. So we tell the same stories as if the government faces the same constraints. In the 60s, you got the government budget constraint stuff, and now we have the idea that governments are just like great big households, and they have to behave like a household, balance their budget, live within their means, all that kind of stuff. And so, one of the big contributions I think we've made is in helping people think more clearly about the way the monetary system works and the way government finance works.
And to me, this confusion, it's across the political spectrum. It drives me crazy to hear both Republicans and President Obama, for example, use this kitchen table, or we've got to tighten our belts, we've got to go. It would, just like any American family doesn't. I always want to say, just like any American family, which issues the dominant global currency. Is that your family? Is that mine? So, and just like, and by the way, when it comes up in the context of cutting Social Security, just like any American family wouldn't talk about starving grandma to pay for Junior's Maserati, there's that dimension of it too. But I guess then you have. I'm so glad you mentioned the Nixon taking us off the gold standard, because to me that seems like a pivotal event that people just kind of ignore. But what are the implications of this in terms of actual policy making? I mean, can you take it to the extreme of saying we don't need to worry about deficit spending anymore at all, or where does this logic lead us?
Okay, so the logic leads you, if you recognize that you're not on a gold standard, that in order to buy things, you don't have to go out and dig up a shiny rock from the ground in order to pay for something, that the United States government, you said, issues the currency. So if the US dollar comes from the US government and can't come from anywhere else, it doesn't come from China, then at least we dispense with all of those excuses that we hear when we talk about the sorts of policies and programs that we would like to see in place, and our politicians say, well, we'd like that too, but we can't afford it. How are you going to pay for it? There's no money. So the first step is recognizing that the affordability question should be off the table. The next question is, once you recognize that you have the ability to buy things, the U.S. government could technically afford to buy anything that's for sale in U.S. dollars, domestically or internationally. And they can outbid anyone, right? There's no one that can outbid the government in terms of U.S. dollars. Not the Koch brothers, not anybody. So the question is, what are the constraints? And does the deficit ever matter? And I would say, and we always say, yes, of course it matters. Okay? But it matters in a way that most people don't usually think about. The constraint is on the inflation side. So if the government said, look, I issue the currency. Dollars can't come from anywhere else. I have a monopoly. If you try to create them, it's counterfeit. You go to jail. So the dollars can only come from me. Now, because I issue the currency, I'm going to go out and spend on everything. I'm going to buy up everything. Well, that's going to be very inflationary. But in a depressed economy, when you've got millions of people who can't find work but want to work, and you've got factories operating at, 2/3 or 3/4 of their full capacity, and you got raw materials lying around available, you can spend into that economy and mobilize resources and put people to work and do things that are important, like infrastructure and healthcare and education. You can climate, right? You can solve and address real problems if you have the real resources available to do it. But we're so hung up on how are we going to pay for it all, and can we do it in a balanced budget environment, right? Is it revenue neutral?
Right.
That we end up getting nothing done.
Well, quick historical aside, in the 19th century, of course, other people were producing alternate scripts, banks, and so on, but,
Yeah.
but we weren't connected with telecommunications the way we are. So the government is the only one who can issue dollars. What you're describing sounds to me a little bit like Keynesianism on steroids, basically saying that we have the ability to use stimulus-type interventions, Keynesian-type interventions, plus much more, because we now have a flexibility in terms of currency issuance that we didn't have before. Is that the right way to read what you're saying? Or?
Keynes did say that. I mean, it's not even so much Keynes on steroids. Once Keynes got to this point, and he got there working with Abba Lerner and reading the work of Abba Lerner, who wrote and called his approach functional finance. And he said, look, what we're doing is basically dysfunctional finance. All this sound finance stuff, balancing the budget is the top priority and all that. And Lerner said we ought to be running policy according to functional finance. And so
and that was even before Nixon took us off
yeah,
the gold
this was
standard.
in the 40s.
Right.
Yeah. And
so there's more flexibility
that's
now.
Right. But so now even more flexibility. So you just
the
see
part, by the way.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
right. Got it.
Okay.
So the policy space opens up when you have the type of monetary system we have. There's more room to maneuver, but we're not willing to use all the space that we have because we're too worried about turning into Greece, the Chinese punishing us, the bond vigilantes coming, burdening the next generation with bonds, right, that we pass down to them that they call, my inheritance. And so we're just getting so much so wrong that it paralyzes us.
So this gets to the $1 trillion question, which is, which I know some of your contributors to New Economic Perspectives feel strongly about, which is the platinum coin that was discussed a great deal last year. The idea that if Congress refuses or there's any other political gridlock, that the president can mint $1 trillion. Now, Paul Krugman and other people signed on to this idea. It's not exclusive to the modern monetary theory adherents necessarily, but the idea the president could theoretically mint $1 trillion coin and use that to pay for projects that he needs. True or false?
False.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple of things. It's close, but it's the Treasury Secretary who legally would have the authority to strike a platinum coin of any denomination. I mean, he could call it $500 billion, 60 trillion, 100 trillion, whatever he wanted, or she, maybe one day, to stamp on that coin and take it over to their bank, which is the Fed, and say, I'm here to make a deposit. So let's call it 100 trillion just for fun.
Right.
So I'm dropping my $100 trillion proof platinum coin into my account. Please credit my account. Now, the Fed has to do that. Okay, I think enough legal scholars, Yale scholars, law professors, and so forth wrote about this, and the legality, I think, anyway, is pretty clear. The Fed has to do this, and Congress is the boss of the Fed. So let's say the Fed credits the bank account. Now, the U.S. Treasury has an account with an extra $100 trillion in it. What happens? Nothing. There's no more spending into the economy. There's no inflation. It's just, they just have more numbers, right?
But
now,
they could then spend it, right?
If Congress, but then you have to get to the point, right, where
Right,
Congress has to
allocates
approve,
it.
set a budget and allocate and appropriate and all that stuff. And then you get the spending, and then you debit the account, just like when you and I spend from our checking account. The numbers will go down over time, but only as much as Congress allows, right, the government to spend on infrastructure, education, healthcare, whatever it is. So it would be, I guess, a slick and clever way. I've never written about the coin myself. I did some television appearances on it, but it was a little bit of a hot topic for a while, and it's a slick way to at least cut at the knees those who say we can't afford it, we can't afford it. So there's the money. Now tell me whether we have approval to spend it.
Now, just hypothetically, if they spent $50 trillion, based off more than they planned to, if there was another $100 trillion in circulation, what would that do to the dollar?
Oh, well, I mean, it depends how much you're spending.
Right, if you spend all of it, let's say.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question, but it would probably be quite bad. If you were to spend $50 trillion very rapidly into the economy. That would be, and without taxing a significant amount back out. I mean,
Right.
that's the difference, right? So you have to. The dollar's going to have value as long as people are willing and in some cases required to work and produce and sell things in order to get dollars because they've got to pay taxes. So when you see countries that have currencies that blow up, nobody wants to hold the dollar or hold the currency. It begins to lose value. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, whatever. It usually is associated with a regime collapse, with war, civil war, Confederate currency, right? After
People
the war.
still seem to trust the dollar, though.
Yes, people trust the dollar. And Adam Smith also wrote in The Wealth of Nations about the fact that the prince, by virtue of the fact that he demands that his taxes be paid in some specific currency that he issues, gives value to that currency. And so as long as you have the right to make and enforce your tax laws, your currency is going to have value. You'd have to do something pretty destructive, right?
Right.
In an otherwise well-functioning
and
democracy.
we have a pretty huge economy and a lot of people. And,
yeah.
All right, last question, but it's a big one. So what do we do to change this? I feel as if we need anthropologists to come in and study the economics community and understand why the folkways have persisted, why some of them are so persistent in the face of contradictory data. We saw it especially after the 2008 crisis, that people are still clinging to old beliefs about the way the market works, about the wisdom of the market, about and of course with monetary theory argument about it's a different world than it used to be. What can be done to change the shared beliefs that aren't necessarily objectively grounded in the economics community?
Well, I think that what you do and what I'm trying to do and many others is working. I mean, I see movement. It's not as much movement or as rapid as I wish it were in my own discipline, but there are voices that are more powerful than others, and some people have a huge following, and to the extent that those folks and Paul Krugmans and people like that begin to get the stuff right and help people see beyond Margaret Thatcher, that there is no alternative. Well, if you think there's no alternative, you don't ask for anything. You start buying into that idea that we have to have shared sacrifice. And when the government says we've got no alternative but to cut, otherwise we're burdening our next generation and we're destroying the country, you say, oh my God, it's my patriotic duty to take these cuts, right? So I hope that my efforts and yours and others are helping people to reach the point where they can start connecting the dots. There was $29 trillion for Wall Street conjured up out of thin air after the crisis. How come there's never money, for infrastructure or climate or education or any of the stuff that we want? So we just have to empower people to push back against this, I think.
Good answer. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
You.
Stephanie Kelton, Chair of Economics at the University of Missouri in Kansas City.
That's right.
Thank you. This is the Zero Hour. I'm RJ Eskow. We'll be right back. We're back on the Zero Hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and with us now is one of the best writers around on financial, economic, banking, and related matters. Writes for Salon.com and Fiscal Times, among others. Our good friend and compadre, David Dayan. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So listen, you've been here. We're here at Netroots Nation, and you led a panel on postal banking. And I know you've written about it a lot. I've written one or two pieces, but you really dug much deeper into it than I have. And you had a panel on it, and I think you had the Inspector General of the Post Office.
Indeed.
And a law professor and a couple other folks. And so what's the consensus? I mean, for people who don't know what the concept of postal banking is or why it might be a good idea, what's the story?
Well, you have to start with what is the problem that you're trying to solve with that. And the problem is that according to the FDIC, over 1 in 4 households in America, and it's probably about 68 million people, have little or no access to financial services. They either have no bank, they're unbanked, or they're underbanked, where they have a bank, but they have the need to use alternative financial services. So where do these people turn when they don't have a stable access to a bank account? If they can't cash a check, or if they can't get a small loan, or what do? they go to payday lenders, or they go to check cashing stores, they go to pawn shops, and these businesses, because these are vulnerable and essentially trapped communities that have no other alternatives, they charge a high premium, according to the FDIC as well. These households make a roughly $25,000 a year, and they pay up to $2,400 a year in interest and fees.
So you're saying on average they make 25,000. So on average they pay nearly 10% of their income.
That's as much as they pay on food.
Right.
Just to have what we take for granted because we have a bank card, just to do the normal financial transactions that you have to do in this society in order to be functional. And so the idea is, how do we solve this problem? Because banks, if they wanted to cater to this market, they would, if they thought there was money to be made, or for whatever reason. Of course, banks fund the payday lenders, so that's a whole other story.
Yes, I have written about that as well.
Yes. So what do you do? I mean, how do you solve this problem? Well, one way is to go back to our past. In 1911, the United States Postal Service had a savings account system where people could get a bank account at the Postal Service. In that time, it was just sort of a savings account that paid 2% interest. It lasted 56 years. At its height, there were 4 million people that had a bank account at the Postal Service, and $3.4 billion in deposits, which was a lot in 1947.
Sure.
So the idea is, let's go back to that and update it for our modern times. We could have the post office deliver things like an ATM card, a prepaid debit card, that you could reload with money.
And right now, if you get those, there are vendors that will provide that for unbanked or underbanked people, but the fees, as you were saying, is extremely high.
There are fees attached to them. And so, yes, there's a popular one. I mean, in one sense, it shows that there is this market here. And that corporate America maybe wants to attract it. But that wouldn't be a good thing necessarily for the consumers themselves. As you say, there are hidden fees and exorbitant fees attached to them in many ways. So what if the Postal Service did this? They could do an ATM card. They could do a savings account to promote savings among communities that have little or no safety net. They could do micro loans and get rid of the payday lending business, absolutely gouging these communities and putting them into a cycle of debt.
And studies have shown vast majorities of people who go to payday lenders have to rotate those debts and wind up paying hundreds of percent in annual interest.
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea, to let the Postal Service, which already does money orders, billions and billions of dollars in face value of money orders every year, which already does international money transfers with 9 Latin American countries. Let's expand this, and it fits with the overall mission of the Postal Service. From way back before we were a country, we had a postal service, and its core mission and its charter among them is to promote commerce. And what would do a better job of that than increasing financial inclusion for millions and millions of Americans, saving them billions of dollars, which would be the biggest inequality reducer that you could do right now. And you can do it according to the Inspector General put out a great white paper on this that your viewers should check out. You can do much of this through the existing authority of the Postal Service. Because they already have a foothold in financial services, you could expand those services out, create pilot programs, and even go nationwide with many of these ideas, and make the Postal Service a public option for financial services.
So let's talk about the limits to that, what this wouldn't do. So presumably it wouldn't include a checking account. You'd have a card which could do many of the same things.
The card would be the functional equivalent of a checking account. If it's a debit card, you could use it to purchase goods in pretty much any store. If you could do online bill pay connected with it.
Although a lot of stores, and I've been meaning to ask you this, a lot of stores want the debit card to have the imprint of a Visa or another credit card company. Or they
That's interesting. So, but, there's certainly partnerships you can do. I mean, most debit cards do have a Visa or MasterCard attached to them. One thing that you could do with this is there's a big fight within the banks. We had this Target data breach that came about. because
where Target stores a great many
Right.
credit card records, information
was
records
stolen,
were stolen. Yeah.
and then copied. And the reason you can do that so easily is that we have the most insecure system in America for credit cards. It's a magnetic stripe system
Right.
that is easily copied. Almost every other country in the industrialized world has a chip and pin, where
Right.
there's a chip implanted in the card, and you have to give a PIN number. So this two-step authentication makes it much harder to, steal and create, these situations of identity fraud. The Postal Service, by working from a base, banks won't update this because they don't want to basically redo what they've already done, and they don't want to spend the marginal extra cost for a chip and pin system, as opposed to a magnetic stripe, which is very cheap.
And there are also, I would assume, the banks are making a great deal of money off these excessive prepaid cards.
Right.
And if the average household is paying, underbanked or unbanked household is paying $2,400 a year,
Right.
that's $2,400 a year the banks are getting, and the banking financial industry more generally is getting, that they don't want to lose. So I assume that's one of the reasons why this idea is not being embraced in Washington.
It's strange that this idea isn't being embraced, certainly by the banking community, because if they really thought that they could make money off these communities and provide them with the services, they would. I mean, what banks say all the time is that low dollar, low income customers are a loss leader for them, that they don't make any money off of those customers. Well, then why should they care if the Postal Service comes in and delivers that level of service to the same communities? But they say, oh, no, you can't let them do that.
Unless, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, unless you have J.P. Morgan Chase, who's backing a lot of payday lenders, who says, well, I don't make any money off these, but then pushes them in the arms of people who do, and they share in the profits.
Yes, I mean, but let's play that debate out in the open.
Right.
That debate is not a public debate right now. If they're saying we don't want the post office to go into financial services because that would undercut the greed mongers that we are funding with our capital investments, that's a debate I'd like to have with the banking industry.
No, absolutely, and we'll get to that in a second. But postal banking is something we've done for a long time. It's an idea I like and support,
and done all over the world, by the way.
Oh yeah, Japan does it, Germany does it, I believe. I think that one of the questions people might ask if they're embedded in this whole financial reform discussion is, well, where does this fit in the kind of ecology of public banking overall, of state banks, of collective banks, of credit unions, where if you're trying to reform the financial system so that it serves people more effectively and fairly and it serves the underbanked and unbanked, where does this fit in all of that?
Right. Well, public banking is more about investments and lending, right?
I mean, the way we do it.
Public banking is really more along the lines of, investing in small businesses, investing in capital infrastructure experiments and things like that.
Right. North Dakota.
North Dakota's
bank is big on that.
Yeah, they don't serve individual customers at the Bank of North Dakota. What this postal banking would do is it would serve individual customers and promote financial inclusion. That would be the main priority. To a far lesser extent, it would help shore up the finances of the post office by creating another revenue stream for them. But it wouldn't be a revenue stream that gouges these customers. You could literally give a 90% discount from what they're paying now and still probably take in about $8 billion a year for the Postal Service if it's spread out and very widespread. So this is a good opportunity it's a win-win for almost everybody here. Individual customers get the security. They can also build credit and become credit worthy. You could see this almost as a stepping stone to larger, to move into the financial world.
Right.
And to move. I mean, you can't get a job. You can't get health care on healthcare.gov. You can't do so many things if you don't have a bank account.
Right.
And so this is just filling this primary need that our people need. Millions of them who are unbanked or underbanked. So it's a win for that. It's a win for the post office that gets a little bit of help on their financial situation. And it could be even seen as a win for banks. If these are loss leaders, these low-income, low-dollar customers, then taking them off their hands means that those risks get socialized for them.
See, that
so
may
they
be
don't
the
wanna
one
do
area.
it.
That may be the one area where I don't completely agree with you, because I think they're making money.
I think we need to make that argument because they make the argument that they're not.
Oh, I
making
know
money
they do.
off of it.
Which gets me to my next question, which is, who are the political champions for this? We don't have a lot of history of either Republicans or Democrats, fighting banks in Washington, D.C. So who are the champions for this?
Okay, so Elizabeth Warren actually has a bill on this. But the good news here is that according to the white paper by the Inspector General's office, you don't need to go through Congress to get much of this enacted. The various postal regulatory commissions, Postal Rate Setting Commission, the Postal Service Board of Governors, which is almost the board of directors of the U.S. Postal Service. They hire the Postmaster General. They can put this in effect through their existing authority. So what's the hold up here? Okay. The Postal Board of Governors is a 9-member board that is nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Right now there are 5 vacancies on that Board of Governors. And there is a functional Republican majority on the Postal Service Board of Governors. 3 of the 4 people who are currently on the board are Republicans. Now this week, there were finally confirmation hearings for 4 new nominees to the Board of Governors, including Vicki Kennedy, who is Ted Kennedy's widow.
Oh, sure.
And a couple of the Democrats. So that would equalize. Obama has still not nominated one person that would actually shift the ideological balance on the Board of Governors. But these 4 nominees, getting them confirmed is a big hurdle. And it shouldn't be a problem to get this very obscure agency confirmed, especially with a 50-vote Senate for confirmations. 2 of the 4 nominees in this hearing expressed either implicit or explicit support for at least a pilot program to study financial services and if it works for the post office. So this can get done. We just need to build a movement around it that says that this is a good idea for working people. It's a good idea for the post office, which is our 2nd largest agency in terms of employment in the country, behind Walmart. It's the 2nd largest employer and the largest, government agency in terms of employment. This is a good thing, and it's also traditionally been an employer that has raised up people of color into the middle class.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
it's been an entryway for a lot of communities, and especially people of color. And it's certainly a lot better than talking about ending Saturday delivery or some of the other things.
Absolutely.
Now I have to say, I've known you for years as a writer and journalist and guy, not as an advocate, but as a guy who analyzes.
Right.
And now I come from the corporate world where I dealt with advocates all the time. You're good at it, actually. I've seen you in a different incarnation. But so what's next for this? I mean, what's next in terms of building public support?
Well, the American Postal Workers Union is on board with this, and they represent hundreds of thousands of postal workers. I believe they are going to try to start going around the country to explain this idea and talk to people. And there are also other social justice organizations like the Appleseed Network. I had a representative from them on the panel this weekend. So I think, you're going to see, you're going to try to build this brush fire from the ground up. And really, there are actual targets. The Obama administration, make that extra nomination so you shift the ideological balance on the board. The Senate, confirm these nominees. And then when they get in, the Board of Governors give us a pilot program.
Right.
So it's a pretty 3-step process there.
Well, that sounds great, and we're going to be tracking it and continuing to read you. David Dayan at Salon and elsewhere, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot. All right.
That was great.
Yeah.
RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour. With us now is Jean Ross, co-president of National Nurses United. Jean, thanks so much for joining us.
I wouldn't miss it.
Well, we wouldn't miss having you. So you guys are about to march. We're here at Netroots Nation in Detroit. You guys are a national organization with more than 185,000 members, but you've come to Detroit to march about water. Tell us about that, if you would.
Well, we have been following closely the shutting off of the water in Detroit, and we look at Detroit as just the first step. It's like a test case for what we know is really going on here. We consider water a basic human right. I believe the United Nations feels the
Right.
same way, why they've taken a role. And the chaos that was created by Wall Street is what's caused the devastation in Detroit, just as in other cities across the nation. And no matter what the circumstances are and who caused it, people should not be denied something as basic as water.
Now, you guys are nurses, and we know that doctors take a Hippocratic oath. Nurses are also, you've chosen as a profession, human health. And people think of nurses as caring for individuals on a person by person, bed by bed, hospital by hospital, case by case basis. But really, how do you see this relating to your mission as nurses? I assume you do see a connection.
Absolutely. We are advocates for the patients. That's our job in the hospital. That's our job in the clinic. No matter what we do, we advocate for patients. Well, everybody's a prospective patient. And certainly when you do something like turning off the water, you leave them with no choice. I mean, if they weren't ill to start with, they're going to be soon. You have to be able to flush your toilets. You have to, and indeed, some of these people are elderly and ill inside their homes, and still they've had the water shut off.
It's unbelievable.
So we advocate for patients whether they're ill now or not, and so this is part of our role, movement politics.
How do you see yourselves following up after you march? In other words, we're talking now on Friday, and this is for those of you listening to the broadcast. This is a pre-recorded, but so you will march today, and then what's the follow-up? How do we keep the pressure on? How do other people help?
Well, we help keep the pressure on with the groups that we're working with, not just here in Detroit, but other water activist groups. And I think if people understand our, for example, Robin Hood tax bill, we wouldn't even be talking about some of the things we're talking about here at Netroots Nation if we had that Robin Hood tax enacted. We would have the money. You would not have people talking about turning off water.
Now, when you say Robin Hood tax, you mean tax on high income, on millionaires, and
It's a tax on Wall Street. It's the people who caused the chaos, who can most afford it.
a financial transaction tax.
Exactly. It was introduced by Keith Ellison. It's HR 1579. He's reintroduced it this year, and we have more sponsors. I believe Charlie Rangel just added himself on. So we will be pushing that for some time. And we continue to work with the activist groups and the ecological groups that believe this tax will fund many, many things that can turn our country around.
Well, we're all for that too. So we will be looking for you on the march, and we will be looking for the follow-up. And thanks so much for joining us, Jean Ross, co-president of National Nurses United.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And the 0 hour is back. As you know, the 0 hour, or you don't, in which case you're about to find out, the 0 hour would not be the 0 hour if we didn't have RJ's Random News. Strange news stories, interesting news stories, news bites from around the country and around the world. Okay, number one, a plan to evict Roma gypsies by playing loud music backfired on a town mayor. You know, the civil rights of the Romani people in Europe are the subject of a lot of struggles in Europe. There are a lot of prejudice against them. And in Belgium, in the town of Landen, about 30 miles from Brussels, the mayor wanted to evict gypsies by playing, as they are called in this article in The Independent, I think they prefer the Roma people, because he feels they were staying too long on a private piece of land. So the mayor hired a local DJ to play music up to 95 decibels in volume, which, by the way, is the equivalent of a pneumatic drill 50 feet away, in order to drive the gypsies away. But the choice of music may have undercut the whole effort. The song played, Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits. Now, Sultans of Swing did not have the desired effect, as The Independent note, because immediately the children in the camp began dancing, which makes them the only people under 65 who continue to dance to Dire Straits. I admire Dire Straits a great deal, but that was an interesting historical anomaly. And one camp resident told Reuters, "I want to thank the mayor. It is very nice that he sent a DJ for us to have a party." Now, look, this is not the way you drive anybody out. When they were harassing Noriega in Panama, They did not play Sultans of Swing, okay? They played like death metal. I mean, that's what you do. You play metal. You don't play Mark Knopfler, okay? So the mayor explained he only used the nonviolent method because the group had been very difficult to negotiate with, and confirmed that after further discussions they had agreed to move on, which was a good thing because next up was Blondie. Now, in additional random news stories, the search for alien life. Now, you know, we always talk about this kind of thing. Okay, for the first time in history, according to scientists, humanity is within reach of finding Earth-like planets where life exists, says a scientist, but these extraterrestrials may not take the form of intelligent beings, which suggests to me we'll feel right at home with them. Okay, NASA's Next Generation Telescope, set to launch in 2018, and its larger successors will give scientists the ability to look for signatures of life, meaning biological signatures that there are biological organisms there. But they are convinced that the vast majority of planets, if not all of them, will contain life that has no real intelligence. But how do you know that? So we now know that we live in a galaxy filled with presidents. Well, excuse me, I got to get out of this politics thing. We now know we live in a galaxy filled with planets, but we don't know that there will be intelligent life on them. Okay, well, we'll keep looking. And by the way, speaking of Noriega, I almost forgot this one. Manuel Noriega, who of course was imprisoned by the United States after we got him out of the embassy by playing heavier music than Sultans of Swing, is suing Activision over a character in the game Call of Duty. The character's name is Manuel Noriega. And Manuel Noriega in Call of Duty, it might be Call of Duty 2, but the character in Call of Duty 2 is a guy who works with the CIA and then double crosses the CIA, and his name is Manuel Noriega. Of course, there are many people who feel that was Noriega's life story, but he took exception to it. He is seeking damages and lost profits because, of course, everybody buys a game solely because it has Manuel Noriega in it. So, again, look, he should just be grateful that we didn't lay the dire straits on him and let it go. So when we get the chance, we'll give you some more random news, but please stick with us. We got more to come on Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.